Nice try, my man. But unfortunately, you're in our territory, so how about you just give me your wallet and car case?
Come on! Give up! Come on! Piece of shit!
The film opens with Frank Valera, a man who has just exited his car and entered a restaurant, where he appears to be quite reserved. Despite the waitress offering him a menu and serving coffee, Frank remains silent. However, beneath this quiet demeanor lies an acute sense of hearing, allowing him to pick up whispers from a distance. This unique ability enables him to overhear conversations from the kitchen, prompting him to stand up, enter the kitchen, and lock the door behind him before launching an attack on a chef. The narrative then shifts to the past, depicting Frank as a successful and ambitious lawyer who resides in a mansion with his wife, Sue Valera, and their daughter, Olivia Valera. His demanding career often leaves him with little time for his family. One day, Olivia calls Frank to remind him of his promise to attend her school performance. Unfortunately, when she looks for him in the audience, she only sees her mother, leading to her disappointment, as Frank is delayed by work commitments. After completing his tasks, Frank hurriedly makes his way to the performance venue but arrives too late. The show has already concluded. With no recourse, he returns home only to find that Sue and Olivia have not yet arrived. As he anxiously awaits their return, his concern intensifies when the police arrive at his home. They inform him that Sue and Olivia have tragically died and request that he accompany them to the train yard, where their bodies have been discovered. Upon seeing them, Frank instinctively rushes forward as if to embrace them, but the officers restrain him. The funeral for Sue and Olivia is somber, attended by many guests, including Frank's father-in-law, Chuck. Chuck has long harbored animosity towards Frank, which deepens following the tragic events. He holds Frank accountable for their deaths, attributing it to his greed as a lawyer who prioritizes defending wealthy clients regardless of their guilt. Chuck concludes their conversation by expressing his desire not to hear another word from Frank. In the aftermath of the funeral, Frank is consumed by guilt, often found sitting in Olivia's room, poring over her notes. One day, Frank visits the police station to inquire about the investigation into the deaths of Sue and Olivia. He meets with Detective Lustiger, who is handling the case. Lustiger informs Frank that, while his team discovered golden threads at the crime scene, this evidence is insufficient to substantiate any claims. Frustrated by the police's lack of progress, Frank copes with his sorrow by drinking heavily. One evening, after consuming several drinks, he finds himself in a bar where he inadvertently witnesses a chaotic fight among a large crowd. In his inebriated state, Frank provocatively engages one of the fighters, inviting an altercation. To his surprise, the following day, Frank becomes a participant in the fights as a means of channeling his feelings of failure regarding Sue and Olivia's deaths. Lacking any martial arts training, he is easily defeated by the other fighters, consistently returning home with bruises. This continues until one day, he suffers a severe beating from one of the fighters. Fortunately, he is rescued by Officer Hank Strode, the same officer who had previously taken him to the train yard. During a conversation at a cafe, Strode reveals that he also participates in illegal fights to relieve stress and expresses surprise at seeing Frank there. He further informs Frank that the investigation into the case has been temporarily suspended. Upon hearing this news, Frank becomes enraged. He struggles to accept the situation but feels powerless to effect change. Later that night, as he makes his way home, a young girl approaches him, attempting to solicit his attention. Recognizing her youth, Frank declines her advances. Shortly thereafter, a man arrives to escort the girl away. Not wanting the girl to fall into child prostitution, Frank rebukes the man. The man responded to Frank's rebuke by beating him until he bled. Frank manages to confront the man, but in a sudden turn of events, the girl stabs him in the left thigh, causing him to lose his balance and crash against a bookstore window. Fortunately, he lands in a pile of bookshelves and uses one of the books to staunch the bleeding from his wound. As he staggers out of the shop to evade the police, Frank begins to read the book that had served as a makeshift bandage. It is titled Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Unintentionally, he came across a section of the book discussing the consequences for individuals who confess to their crimes. Motivated by the insights he gained, Frank committed to reading the book daily, which inspired him to pursue martial arts training. He subsequently engaged in rigorous self-training across various disciplines, including karate and boxing. Initially, Frank found himself easily overpowered by his instructors. However, as his skills progressed, he eventually succeeded in defeating his karate coach during a practice session. His boxing training also yielded positive results, with noticeable improvements in the power of his punches. One day, Frank marked a line across the mouth of a man depicted on the cover of a book he was reading, symbolizing his vow to remain silent until he could exact revenge on those responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughter. Remarkably, following this commitment, Frank's hearing became unusually acute, enabling him to detect even the faintest sounds. The next day, he visited the location where the bodies of Sue and Olivia had been discarded by their assailant. At that site, he discovered a container filled with furniture resembling that of a home, featuring a hole that overlooked where Sue and Olivia's bodies had been found. Unable to uncover any clues, Frank returned to his vehicle parked near an overpass. Upon arrival at his car, he encountered 4 thugs attempting to vandalize it.
Nice ride, my man. But unfortunately, you're in our territory, so how about you just give me your wallet and car case?
Come on! Give up! Come on! Piece of shit!
Concurrently, the 4 thugs fled the scene, oblivious to the fact that Frank had lost consciousness beside his car. When he regained consciousness, Frank found himself in a house with a nurse named Alma. After introducing herself, Alma informed Frank about his condition when she discovered him at the train yard. Frank remained unresponsive and declined to speak, ultimately leaving without expressing gratitude, despite Alma's intention to treat his wound. Outside Alma's house, the dog awaited him and followed Frank wherever he went. Recognizing this bond, Frank decided to bring the dog home with him. Each day, Frank diligently collected evidence to uncover the identities of Sue and Olivia's killers, gathering newspaper clippings and photographs related to the murder case. One afternoon, Alma visited to return Frank's wallet, which he had left at her house. Frank invited her inside. Unexpectedly, Alma uncovered the reason for Frank's silence. He then showed her the photographs of Sue and Olivia, along with the evidence he had amassed. With Alma's assistance, Frank was able to identify the occupants of a container near the crime scene. Alma revealed that one of the container's occupants worked at a restaurant. Consequently, Frank visited the restaurant to meet this individual, a cook known as Mr. Shivers. This encounter was depicted at the beginning of the film, where Frank interrogated Mr. Shivers. During the confrontation, Frank severely assaulted Mr. Shivers before presenting him with a photograph of Sue and Olivia. Under duress, Shivers confessed to witnessing their murder but could not clearly identify the assailant, only confirming that the perpetrator was wearing a police uniform and left the scene in a vehicle. Mr. Shivers admitted to taking money from a wallet left in Sue's car before discarding it. To verify Shivers' account, Frank returned to the crime scene, this time accompanied by his new dog, which proved invaluable. The dog discovered Sue's purse in a nearby manhole. Frank then proceeded to the police station, where he stealthily entered Lustiger's office and accessed his computer files. He aimed to determine which officers were on duty at the time of Sue and Olivia's deaths. To his surprise, he found Strode's name listed, leading him to question whether Strode was involved in his wife's murder. To uncover Strode's motives, Frank followed him for 7 days and nights. One day, while trailing Strode to his residence, Frank observed Strode leaving his house. Seizing the opportunity, Frank entered the home in search of evidence. In the living room, he came across a photograph of Strode with his young daughter. While inspecting the wardrobe, he discovered one of Strode's police uniforms with a loose gold thread from an embroidered badge. This gold thread reminded Frank of evidence Lustiger had previously uncovered. Intrigued, Frank continued searching Strode's wardrobe and stumbled upon a hidden passage containing a backpack. Inside the backpack were several magazines documenting Frank's attendance at Sue and Olivia's funeral, as well as articles from his time as a lawyer. One article detailed how he had successfully defended individuals accused of murdering Strode's daughter. That afternoon, upon returning home, Strode found a photograph placed under the windshield wiper of his car. On the back of the photo, Frank had written a message requesting that Strode meet him at Kingsman Station at 11 p.m. The designated meeting place was an abandoned warehouse at the station. Strode cautiously exited his vehicle. Meanwhile, Frank had concealed himself and suddenly attacked Strode, resulting in an intense fight between them. At the conclusion of the confrontation, Frank, presented with the opportunity to stab Strode, unexpectedly chooses to spare his life, having successfully conquered his desire for revenge. In the final scenes of the film, Frank is depicted leaving the courthouse after attending the trial in which Strode was convicted of his crimes. Subsequently, Frank, accompanied by Alma, pays a visit to the graves of Sue and Olivia. Before their resting places, Frank breaks his vow of silence, uttering the heartfelt words, "I love you." Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.